Thank you, David. Do you want me to use this?
Well, you'll be heard.
Do you want me to use this, or can you hear me okay? Hear me fine? Don't need it really, do I? Well, thank you, David, and thank you, Helen, for inviting me. I welcome the opportunity to speak with you. We've heard presentations this morning about spirit release therapy, how Paula goes about her work, and Helen, and how David goes about his work in dealing with parts. I work completely differently. I only do now remote work. And working with a medium, I'm a psychologist and researcher and hypnotherapist, and I don't have the skills to communicate with spirit directly, that kind of mediumship. So I work with mediums. And working with my friend and colleague, Andrew, who unfortunately can't be here today because he's got family commitments, but we've worked for about 6 years together now, developing a protocol with his spirit guide, whose name is Chen. The last time he lived an earth life was 500 years ago, and he's been helping us to develop a protocol that we can apply to really serious cases of mental illness. And we are dealing primarily with cases of schizophrenia and psychosis, people who are sectioned on antipsychotic medication and in psychiatric hospitals. And these are the sort of people that it is virtually impossible to engage in any kind of therapy because of the mental state that they have and their inability to communicate in a normal way. So with Chen's guidance and help over the years, we've developed a protocol that enables us to work with these patients. And of course, we're doing it remotely. They can be anywhere in the world, in psychiatric hospital. 50% of our clients are in North America. The rest are scattered all over the world. And we've developed this protocol that enables us to deal with cases very, very quickly and very efficiently. And of course, then people will ask us, well, does it work? And how do you know it works? And this is where the research comes into its own. So what I've started to do is to develop an integrated method where we are able to integrate treatment with training and research. And I'd just like to introduce you to the method that I use of integrating these component parts. Now, it's not my intention to try to teach therapists to be researchers. And it's not my intention to teach researchers to be therapists, because we all have our individual skills. But in order to show that these methods work, we need to present evidence. And this is the method that I use to present this evidence. So we start off by saying, what's the problem? Mainstream medical science has difficulty in treating these serious cases of psychosis and schizophrenia. And the mainstream method is antipsychotic medication. And many of the cases that are presented to us are from family members, loved ones who have a family member in hospital, and they've virtually lost hope. They just see their loved one in hospital on lifelong medication, and it's devastating for the family. So they come to us and say, is there anything you can do? So we use this method to see if we can look inside where mainstream medicine can't. So the question is, for mainstream medicine, how do we get in here? Well, the method we use is to say, let's try this. Telepathy, remote work. So we are working beyond time and space. We go into the spiritual domain, and we are able to communicate with the patient, doesn't matter where they are, anywhere in the world, Doesn't matter what circumstances they're in, doesn't matter what condition the cognitive faculties are in, we can communicate with them on the spiritual levels, and we have meaningful conversations with them. Gathering research data, and this is the method that I use, and it's the first test. In fact, I call this the first test. It's just a foundation of an idea that hopefully can be developed and built on. Treating every case as a source of valuable research data. So we received the request for help from a client. The client is the person who's asked for help. The patient is the subject. Okay? So we receive information from the client, and basic information is entered into a statistical package for the social sciences, or the free version is PSPP, and anyone here who is a researcher will understand what I mean. And I'm not here to teach you what SPS is, but just to show you that we enter data into a data collection platform. This is what it looks like. It's just a grid of numbers. It doesn't mean anything to anybody. But if we give those numbers a data label, and I apologise for the screen, we can't see very clearly because of the texture of the screen. But some of the variables are identified as the age of the patient, their gender, where they live, or not exactly where they live, but the geographical location. We record their religion. We record, is there a medical diagnosis that's been given? And so we've got demographic data of the sample that we're dealing with. Then we have to enter the case, and they're given an individual unique case file number in order to maintain confidentiality. So names are not used in the data. And the cases are entered into the work schedule. So we have two types of data that's collected here. The first is the statistical data that I showed you earlier, and the second type of data is a recording. And I use two recording devices. I use audio-visual recording of the conversation that I'm having with the medium. We usually work on Skype. I live in Kent, he lives in Wiltshire, so all our work is done on Skype. Okay? And that is recorded automatically on the machine. I also have an audio-digital recorder, so that if one fails, I can use the other. And very often on the audio-visual recording, we get feedback. So I can substitute that audio part of the recording with the digital recording, and we get clear sound. So from a research point of view, we've got data that can be listened to and observed from the phenomenological perspective. This is qualitative data research, okay? Whereas the SPSS, that's quantitative data research. And as I said, I'm not here to teach anyone how to be a researcher, but I understand research. This was my profession, and I know how it's done. So what we have here, a unique case file number, the type of client that it is. Sometimes we have a repeat client. We have different gradings of client. The date that it came in, who it's for. This snapshot, these cases are for the self. These are people who've wanted a spiritual health check for themselves, okay? And then the type of scan. A scan is an initial scan. A follow-up is what it says. It's the second scan to see if we've missed anything. How it's recorded, whether it's free or paid, who the medium is. You see there, Margaret helps out from time to time. Margaret's here. Hello, Margaret. She's one of our class mediums. and the date that the recording is sent to the client. Nothing is edited out of the recording for the client. Everything that is recorded is sent to the client so that they understand perfectly what's gone on. So those are our two research instruments, if you like. Now, each case is allocated to a practitioner team. What is a practitioner team for remote work? You have a facilitator who does not have to be mediumistic. This can be a psychologist, a hypnotherapist, a doctor, anyone who is able to work with a medium. The medium is the second member of the team. But the most important member of the team is the spirit guide. And the spirit guide is the key to the whole procedure. And the reason for this is because I, as the facilitator, or the therapist, if you like, I know nothing about this client at all. Only what has been presented to me in the request, okay? Maybe given a medical diagnosis. I don't know how accurate that diagnosis is. I'm not a doctor. I'm not qualified to give diagnoses. So I know nothing apart from the fact that we have a person of a particular gender, particular age, who lives in a particular part of the world, who needs help. So we asked the spirit guide. There's Chen. He's our spirit guide, the one we predominantly work with. There are others. But Chen is the leader of a whole team of guides and helpers in varying hierarchies in the spirit realm. And anything he can't deal with, he goes higher. So we're working with the spirit realm from the position of complete lack of knowledge and naivety, right? We know nothing. We only ask questions. What's the problem here? What's the cause of the problem? How can we deal with it? So that's the remote team. The remote team attends to the client's request. So the remote team receives a request from administration. The remote team attend to the case and record it as I've explained to you. Two types of recording, audio, visual and digital. They get the result. They get the findings. What have we got and how have we dealt with it? That report is then sent, a written report is sent to the client. This is what we found. It's a written report giving the details from the notes that we've discovered, okay? Unfortunately, what we found with a lot of cases, that if we send them the recording straight away, nobody wants to pay for it. But we have these exercises, these interventions, we need to cover our costs. Technology costs money. Communication costs money. There has to be a fee. There has to be an exchange of energy for this work. So we send the written report first, and then when the client has agreed to pay the fee, they get their recording. And then we wait for the feedback. And this is the interesting bit, the feedback. I'll sit on that for 24 hours. I'll send a written report, I'll wait for the fee to be paid, and I'll wait another 24 hours before I send the recording. And very often what happens, I'll get an email back saying, wow, thank you very much, before they've even heard the recording. Because it has an immediate impact. And this is the value of collecting the data. The feedback needs to be recorded and registered on the degree of efficacy. So closing the loop, we get the recording and the report, enter the findings into the database. What did we find? Dark force entities. What was the grounding like? Was this person grounded, not grounded, partial? We look inside the inner etheric body to see what's in there, and this is the most interesting part of the whole exercise, because the spirit guide is giving information to the medium to convey to me or to convey to the inquirer. Or, even better than that, the spirit guide is possessing the medium and speaking directly to me. So I'm having a conversation with the guide, and I'm saying to the guide, look inside the etheric body and tell me what you see. The etheric body needs to be clear, clean, and bright. If it's not, I need to know why. And we always find some really interesting stuff in there. The spirit guide will convey what is found. It's dark, it's murky, it's black, it's stagnant energy, all kinds of implants. The range of stuff that you can find in there is vast. And it's all recorded and documented. And that's entered into the database. So we have statistical findings, okay? And this each case is data. So as time goes by, this data file builds up, and builds up until we have a sufficient number of cases where statistical tests can be applied to see what trends there are. And then we enter the recording information into the schedule, the type of recording that was made, when it was sent to the client. And that can be called upon then for case studies and for in-depth study. Now, when a client sends in an application, a referral form, they have to agree to accept the terms and conditions for us to take on the case. And one of the terms and conditions that I specify is that they grant permission for us to use their case in research and teaching. If they don't agree to that, we can't use it. It's a condition. Okay? And then when we find particularly interesting cases that we can use for study and teaching, I will go back to the client again and say, I just want to ask your permission again, can we use this for teaching our trainees and for research? And I don't use the recording until I get that second confirmation, that permission. So the recording goes off to the client, and then we get the feedback. So during the process of administering to the client, we've collected important data automatically as part of the process. We don't have to go back and check. It's done as it's collected as it's done. And it's entered as it's done. What we do then, we can share the knowledge with researchers and with clinicians and say, this is the method we used, this is the result we've got. Does it work? Does it not? If it doesn't work, go back and try something different. So what we arrive at, hopefully, is a method that we can teach others to use because we know it works. We're not going to teach anything that doesn't work. So this is where we've got the integration of clinical practice, research, and training. And I see this as an ongoing dynamic process, continually developing and evolving, where the objective is to arrive at a method of best practice for treating serious cases of mental health. And all it takes is cooperation for clinicians, researchers, and trainers to work together. This is not a business where we're in competition with each other at all. What I'm trying to do here is to encourage the medical profession to work with us in treating the sick. And that, my friends, is my objective. Now, we've got a training course coming up on the 13th and 14th of April. It's the weekend before Easter. I don't take on any more than 10 people in a training exercise because it's intense, it's in depth, and you can only work with people in small groups. Now, at the moment, we have, for the weekend course that's coming up, we have 6 places that need to be filled. And I'm going to invite some of you here who are interested, take up those places before I offer them out to the general public. Okay, so there's the invitation. Come and look if you've got an interest, if you want to learn what it's all about, hands-on, there's the invitation. There is a fee. You know, these things can't be managed for nothing. There are costs involved. So check out the website, check out the costs, and if you're interested, then come and join us. And that is my message for today. And thank you for listening. 20 minutes is up. There you go. And we've got time for questions. Thank you. Yes, sir.
How do you measure the whole does it work thing? What data do you collect on?
The feedback from the client is very, very important. This is the most difficult part to record and register because everybody's different. We have cases where the method has worked, they've paid their bill, they've got the recording, and you don't hear anything else at all until they come back a month later and say, oh, you did this for me, now can you do it for my dad? So if it didn't work for them, they're not going to ask. So 50% of our cases are repeat business. That's efficacy for you.
But for something like schizophrenia, you wouldn't use the same model your traditional psychiatrist would use to monitor and measure symptoms.
No, we don't use medical model methods at all. We just rely on the feedback from the client, from the family. So if you've got someone who's suffering from schizophrenia in a hospital, it's the family that give the feedback because they notice straight away a change in the family member. I'll give you an example. We received a request from a woman in Germany requesting help for her mother. Her mother was 71 years old and she'd been diagnosed with psychosis at the age of 42. So she'd been psychotic for 30 years. Her husband had died, this woman had a brother, and they had virtually given up in trying to help their mother. She was living in squalor, an alcoholic, untreatable, and they were just in complete despair for their mother. After 2 sessions, it took 2 sessions because there was a portal that we missed on the first pass, but after 2 sessions, we got an email from the client who said, my brother and I have been to visit our mother, and she'd cleaned up her flat, she stopped drinking, she'd had a bath, tinted her hair, cooked us dinner and baked us a cake, and we have our mother back. Thank you. Now that is efficacy. You don't get that kind of feedback with every case because everyone's different. Sometimes people will just not bother to respond. They go away quite happily with no feedback at all. I don't pressure people for feedback. I don't send them a form saying, you know, give us a feedback, what do you think? But when it does come in, I will grade it from 1 to 5. A 5 grading is a written testimonial that's published. And they exist. Yes, sir.
So could you expand a little more on the protocol that you use when the spirit has established what the issues are, and it may be, as you said earlier, maybe dark force entities or whatever, who actually then goes through like the therapeutic part of that?
Okay, I'll do that. We've arrived at this protocol through trial and error and experimentation and a lot of practice, and we've got it down to a fine art now, and the average time that this protocol takes is 8 minutes. Okay? Now, we're not dealing with long-term therapy here. All we're dealing with is cleaning the etheric body of the patient. So, step 1 in the protocol is to check their sovereignty. Is anything dark, non-human, attached to the outer etheric body? That's cleared away immediately, right? And there are varying degrees of intensity, of danger. We classify them grade 1, 2 or 3. Grade 1 is minor. Grade 2 is a bit more powerful, a bit more tricky. The grade 3 is extremely dangerous.
Is that dictated to by the spirit guide who's helping?
Yeah, the spirit guide. I say to the spirit guide, do a sovereignty check. Tell me what you find. We've got two grade 3s here. Oh, 2 big nasties. We call them big nasties, or just negs. And I will say to the guide, when we get this, I'll check the notes then, because I don't read the notes. The medium isn't told anything. It's completely free of any preconceived ideas. So this is a recent case, a couple of days ago. 2 big nasties. And I've looked at the notes of, this family have called in an exorcist. Okay, okay, but that's one side. 2 big nasties. Okay, how do we do? And I'll say to the guide, okay, 2 big nasties. Without any knowledge or help or guidance, what would the family be inclined to do with a case like this? Would they call in an exorcist? And you say, oh yeah, they'd call in an exorcist. Would it work? No, it wouldn't work. Why doesn't it work? Because these big nasties are not of this earth. They are interdimensional and they don't respect our religious rituals at all. They just laugh. And they tend to be interdimensional species that use the energy of the human etheric body as an incubator for their offspring. They lay eggs in the etheric body. So we have to appeal to higher realms of spirit, very, very high realms, that have the power to remove these. There's no negotiation. They're just moved and they're told to take their eggs with them. It sounds like science fiction, doesn't it? But this is a regular occurrence. So that's the first step, the sovereignty of dark force entities. Second step is grounding. Third step is looking inside the etheric body, clearing it all out, and we have guides that have cosmic vacuum cleaners to suck all the muck out. And usually behind the muck, there's something else hidden. There's entities that are hiding within the etheric body and manipulating people. They just got rid of. No negotiation, just clean them out. Check all the chakras. Make sure that all the chakras are open and clear and functioning properly so the light can pass through freely. That's the third step, fourth step. Then we move on to a whole spectrum of frequencies, and what the guide will do will change the frequency of his viewing. So he's looking at different channels, different frequencies. And I'll ask the guide to check a whole range of frequencies looking for interdimensional parasites. And these can be bugs, worms, maggots. They are presented in a form that we can understand. And all kinds of explanations come out. And it would be fascinating to record the different types of parasite that are collected. But we haven't got time for that. We just want them cleared away. Any interdimensional parasites, yeah, get rid of them, clear it out, done, finished. Next step is earthbounds. And this is Paula's area. Now, Paula, as we've heard earlier, her therapy is dealing with the trauma of the earthbound and negotiating and so on. We don't go into the same depth at all. We discover earthbounds, and we generally find that if the number of earthbounds is anything from 1 to 4, they are usually sympathetic resonance. It's that connection that they have with the person. They've picked them up through sympathetic resonance, and they're lost souls, and they're quite happy to be moved on. When you've got big nasties, they will actually capture lost souls. We had insight recently, didn't we, where we discovered, it was Joy, wasn't it? It was looking at a hospital where dark energies hovering around the entrance to the hospital to capture them as they left the body. And these earthbounds are then forced into the etheric field of the patient with the deliberate intention of causing mental disturbance, driving them mad. So, and they're very, very pleased to be released because the experience for them is horrendous. So we deal with the earthbound, two different types of earthbounds, the lost soul, the spontaneous, and the forced ones. And without going into any great lengthy procedure, we just ask for someone to come and collect them, and they go to the light. So now we've dealt with the spiritual dimensions. Now we go into the tricky bit. The next question is, are there any self-created thought forms? And the question after that, are there any dissociated subpersonalities? Now, we've heard David talk about dissociated subpersonalities and how entities can attach to those dissociated parts. And the way we deal with this is, and I'm not standing here saying to you that this works every time, because it often does need further therapeutic work. But the way we deal with the self-created thought form and the dissociated subpersonality immediately appeal to the higher self. Can we have approval from the higher self to deal with these? Yes or no? And we get if we give them approval, then the next question is, can the energy of the created thought form, because this is in addition to the self, it's created as an addition to the self, the positive energy of that can be integrated with the core self. If it's negative, it can be dispersed because it's not a part of the self. It can be dissolved. Moving on to the dissociated subpersonalities, how many are there? What ages are they? 2, 5, 13, 14, whatever. Higher self, can they be reintegrated? Very often, the first 3, yeah, no problem. They just want to be loved. They want to come back in to be a part of the core self. Okay, can we make that happen? And it's done as fast as that. The difficult ones are the teenagers. the challenging teenager part. And this is the most challenging part of the work, really, because then we have to negotiate with that teenager and to get their permission for them to be reintegrated. If it can't be done, then okay, our job's done, we can't do any more. That's further therapeutic work. So that process that I've just explained to you, how long did it take me to explain that to you? 5, 10 minutes, right? That's how long it takes to do it. As fast as I can explain it, that's how fast it's done. I say to the guide, are we done here? Yes. Any advice for the client? A little word of advice. What do they need to do? They need to learn self-love, need to protect themselves, need to stop drinking, they need ongoing therapy, whatever. Okay. Protocol ended. And that's how it's done. I started counting cases about 14 months ago. And we've just reached the 400 mark recorded. Yes?
You know, like you collect the data and all this as you put it, yeah?
Yep.
Right. I didn't hear how long you've been doing this work, yeah? But have you found, say, in the last 4 or 5 years, any consistent changes, trends?
Haven't been doing it that long. No, as I said, I only started collecting the data about 14 months ago and giving them case numbers. Yeah, about 14 months ago, I started collecting data. It's not going to give any meaningful statistics until we've got at least 1,000 cases that can be studied statistically. But trends are beginning to emerge, but I don't really want to say what those trends are. Because it's too early.
It's too early. I'm noticing trends emerging, right? I'm very, very aware of this. I'm just feeling as if somebody else is picking up the trends that I've become aware of. Or should we talk about it some other time?
We can talk. It's an in-depth subject, and we really haven't got time to explore that in great detail. But by all means, you're welcome to our gang of researchers. Any other questions from anyone? Yes.
I know this might be a bit random, and whatnot. What happens if you come across cancer? How do you cope with that?
We're not looking for it.
But doesn't this work affect cancer? in the
No,
body?
we're dealing with spiritual dimension, and not the physical.
Right.
We're not setting up. We don't. I've never had anyone come to us asking for a solution for cancer.
No, that's not. Well, so you've not come across cancer in the body?
It's an important question, really, because you can only find what you're looking for. We're not looking for cancer. If the cancer exists, we don't see it because we're not asking you to find it. Right. You only find what you're looking for. Very often we'll get a case where a person has got a physical problem of some kind, fibromyalgia or arthritis, or and in the box for medical diagnosis, there may be a medical diagnosis for a physical problem. And I'll just note that this person has a physical problem, but we're not here to deal with that. That's medicine deals with that. But sometimes I'll get an inspired thought and I'll say to the guide, okay, what we've discovered in the spiritual domains, has this any bearing on the physical condition of this person? And usually not. Usually it's something to do with diet or environment. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Good, thank you. Any more? Yes, sir.
With a client that, say, had childhood issues, which caused them to be susceptible to getting attachments in the first place,
Yes.
and you was to clear those attachments,
Yes.
are you able to continue with the spirit release to do the further healing needed so that they would no longer be susceptible to future attachments?
No, what we do is suggest to the client that they need to engage in ongoing therapy in order to address those childhood issues from a psychological perspective. So we're only really cleaning the spirit that's become affected with nasty stuff and with attached earthbound spirits. So, and this is the marked difference between, and I need to reinforce this, we're not doing therapy. This is not spirit release therapy. This is remote spirit release. So if ongoing therapy is needed, then the guide will suggest that, then that person needs to engage someone like David or Paula for the ongoing work. Yeah. Okay. Are we done?
That's the polite way of doing it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Was there any parts of it that left you feeling curious?
Well, coming from someone that actually not that involved in the spirit release side, what these guys do essentially, I thought it was really interesting actually, because it was more of an understanding and awareness of what really involved. That although I work with spirit and it's a lot of information there that I was just completely blown away with. I wasn't aware.
The big thing for me that I've really found is the deepness that this goes into, the level of negativity that it can go into, but also the simplicity of how effective it works. And the most important thing, of course, is that it's effective.
I don't think there's anyone else doing research into the remote spirit release or any spirit release, because the most important thing is to get the medical profession to understand that it can be the actual basis of all the problems.
I'm able to do this work now thanks to Terry's training programs, and I'm really thrilled, and I'm hoping that, well, I know that I'm going to be able to do this for the rest of my life, and it's the most fulfilling work that I have ever done.